us now. Welcome. Let me introduce the panel that we have this morning. We are joined by Ruth Ambogo, who's a youth policy advisor. We also have David Osiani, who is a governance consultant, and Philip Magal, who is a lawyer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome for the usual Friday session where we review the papers, but also review the week that was. And of course, as you'd imagine, the dailies are splashed with yesterday's speech by the president being Jamhuri Day. We start off with the Standard, where the headline is the BBI riddle. Now, weeks after receiving a report hailed by its authors as a product of an extensive public consultation, Uhuru and Raila's task force to collect more views, their term was extended, which, of course, when the chairman was asked as to, what he had to say about that, he said he's waiting for the gazettement, sort of being shifty about it. He didn't come out clean to say, yes, it has been extended and what the terms are. But let me start with you, Philip, yes. Especially from a legal perspective. There was always questions regarding the 14-member team that had been put as the BBI. Yes. They've now brought in the report, which of course is at what I'd call a proposal stage. Yes. But their terms being extended, there is all sorts of narratives surrounding that. There are some who are saying that maybe what was brought to us was doctored, and as a result, there is some things that maybe the two principals would want put there. But what's the legal structure?
There is actually a constitutional challenge in our courts asking, the court to review the appointment of those 14 individuals as well as their mandate. It is argued that, public funds are being used to finance a private enterprise. There's some credence to that, but then again, I can't think of any particular constitutional provision that they have contravened. Mm-hmm. The thing is, this is an initiative under we can say under the auspices of the Office of the President. The funds thereunder are being used to run it. It is an initiative to better the country. Therefore, there wouldn't really be any challenge per se against it. But for them to commence their duties and for the public to understand the extent of their mandate, the terms of reference, of course, we need the Gazette notice, which will which is the official publication to the public on their appointment. And
their terms and what they're going to be, the framework of what they're going to be working on. Ruth, yes. Would you have expected possibly at this point in time for a commission of sorts to be set to now carry this forward, as opposed to having the same 14-member team, which, remember, if we go back to history, we were not clear on how they were chosen, how they came up with this. Would have expected maybe at this point in time, fine, they have brought the report, would like to look at it as Kenyans and see the way forward, but would expect then a commission that is set up in a transparent way.
Well, I don't know about the issue of transparency, because I believe that, as Magal has said, the president, in his capacity as a symbol of national unity, had the power to constitute whichever team that he wished to carry on this particular task. I believe from Kenyans' reactions to the report that came out about 2 weeks ago, we could see majority of Kenyans, if not by a representation of their leaders, that, people did not seem to now have questions as to the transparency of the constitution of this particular co-commission, or rather task force. Because previously what had happened was that those who were against BBI were the ones carrying on the sentiments. Those who were against BBI before the report came out were the ones who seemed to carry on the sentiments that, there was no transparency in the appointment of the members of the task force. But then when the report came out, there seemed to be a unison song, or rather unison acceptance of the report, and it appears as if the issues of who constituted the task force were swept under the carpet. So we would want to, and I think in Kenya, most things are rejected based on who is supporting it and who is against it, and what is the political narrative of the day at the time. Today, even if a commission were to be appointed and they were taken to parliament, and a whole vetting process went on, we would still have the same conversations around, oh, this person was not fit to be there, or our person was not even appointed to the task force. So we will always have somebody opposing something, whether the right procedure is followed. And I'm not talking, and I'm not insinuating that the wrong procedure was followed, but we will always have somebody opposing something that is happening in the country. We know that following the launch of the report, there was a discussion, or rather it came out that in January, there would be this national conference around the report. So how much time do we have between now and January to go through the entire official process of constituting an entire commission? You know, that would have to go through Parliament. Parliament would have to vet the names. And as it stands right now, I think they're on recess. And, you know, January is literally, I think when we are in December, people think January is it's like a year away. I mean, January is literally a few days away. So there's very little time to constitute an entire commission. And remember that this task force has carried on this process for, is it 1.5 years plus? Now, what would it, you know, changing hands and bringing in different people would change the entire thing altogether. So,
absolutely, and maybe lose track. David Osiani, your thoughts on the BBI riddle as it's being called by the Standard?
You know, when the BBI submitted its report, they left Kenyans hanging. Now, we didn't know where from here. Fine, we've had a beautiful occasion at the Bomas. So what next? And for people like myself who sought an answer to that question, the extension of the term or mandate of the task force gives a bit of clarity.
Yeah.
So that then now we can task the BBI as a task force, which has a mandate to explain to us, where do we go from here? Of course, as you had asked earlier, I really hoped that we would have something like a committee of experts, people who have now a proper understanding of the law, unlike the committee, the task force, which carries everyone from parliamentarians and people from the clergy. I expected a more technical team to possibly put that whole BBI document into a bill, into what can be tabled in Parliament. This committee of experts, in my estimation, would have been a better way to go than just extending the mandate of the BBI task force. But be that as it may, we expect them to communicate in the next few days, where do we go from here? How does this document move on from here? Which way are we going to effect some of these changes that may need, a change of law? The president had said that some of the recommendations they made, can be implemented by various ministries, and he had instructed that those bits of that be submitted to those ministries for implementation. We don't even know which ones they are, who has been tasked with implementing them. So all that information needs to be out here. There's been a bit of a disconnect. So thankfully, that is resolved with the extension of that term, but only to the extent that they can explain to us what next with this document.
All right, and I'm sure many Kenyans would
if
be
I may
asking
just
what
clarify on the legal process of appointment of these commissioners, or the task force as it were.
Yeah.
The president in his office has some implied powers. Remember, this is not a constitutional office. Therefore, there are no procedures for appointment of these individuals into office. We cannot ask for public participation. We cannot ask for notification of public to inviting applications. We cannot have a vetting process by Parliament. We cannot ask for inclusivity. This is purely an initiative under the powers of the president as the head of state. So therefore, you cannot challenge it on any of those grounds. In his communication yesterday, he said that he's reappointed them so that they can engage in further public participation and reduce this document into actionable points, which, of course, like Osiani alludes to, we had been left hanging and we needed to see how would these items be implemented. On an appointment of a committee of experts, again, it would be the same process, just like the appointment of the task force, because these are not constitutionally provided for offices.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And moving on now to other stories which were coming out of the president's speech yesterday, but even this debate and questions had already arisen, and on page 4, President seeks to block lawyers, MPs from courts. Ruth, your thoughts on this? We had a discussion here earlier in the week where there was, a heated debate as to whether there is actually conflict of interest for the likes of Murkomen and, the likes of Mutula Kilonzo Jr. representing Sonko, given especially their positions as senators, and they have oversight over governors. Then they're the same people representing them in court.
Well, this is a very interesting discussion because I also had this discussion with a group of my friends, and I was of the opinion, there was this whole discussion as to whether this is purely a moral question in terms of that the senators who are also lawyers should have known that, where they stand, they protect the public's interests first over and above private interests, which are the case that now the private interest would be Sonko's, legal wars with EACC. So there's a whole debate as to whether this is a moral discussion or this is a legal discussion. In my view, I think this is a purely legal discussion, and I feel that it has already been taken care of under the Ethics and Integrity. Is it the Ethics and Integrity Act? This flows from the Leadership and Integrity chapter of the Constitution, which talks about that when you as a leader or anybody within a position of trust where citizens have entrusted you to lead them or to deliver certain functions on their behalf, that if in your delivery of functions or in your leadership you perceive that there is going to be conflict of interest in whatever endeavor it is that you're undertaking, then you should be able to declare it and say that, look, in this endeavor that I'm undertaking, I foresee there's going to be there's going to be conflict of interest. Now, I think the question becomes, how do we define conflict of interest? Because what happens is that here you are as a senator representing the people. And basically, you, as a senator, your key role is to play oversight over county governments, meaning that if a motion for impeachment for Sonko is to take place, or rather is to be instituted, this motion is supposed to come back to Senate, where you will be expected to vote on it as a representative of the people. At that point, now that you're the official legal counsel of Sonko, what will you do at that particular point? Others are arguing and saying that, there's no law that criminalizes you from representing anybody, and so up until a law is in place, they are right to act the way they did. They are right to represent Sonko. But I honestly feel that this is a question that has already been taken care of by the law. They should foresee that in the event that an impeachment motion is to come, and we cannot predict. These are serious allegations, and from the look of things, it appears, and I'm not judging, I do not want to crucify Sonko, I do not want to declare him guilty before legal processes take place, but if you're to follow the case and look at the kind of evidence that has been presented, you can clearly foresee a likelihood of an impeachment motion coming. What position or what role will they take? And you see now that will make us, and I think it also puts me in a very difficult position, because at some point I am going to be a lawyer, and at some point I probably do have political ambitions. What if I become a senator? And at that point, I probably have a client I have been representing a long time in issues that did not necessarily involve, public money. What will happen? I think the right thing to do is to step aside and say, look, let somebody else take over this case. And I understand that, Kenyans are of the general opinion that, this has been going on for a long time. We had the case when Orengo represented, was it Ojamong? And the matter went to court, and the lawyer, the judge declared that there was no conflict of interest. But moving forward, Kenyans are asking themselves, who is going to hold their interest, who is going to take care of their interest, who is representing them. But then again, when the president, because it's the president, this statement came from the president, when the president talks about conflict of interest, one also asks themselves, how far should conflict of interest extend? Remember the other day we saw on the news that his own mother has been on a payroll, on a public payroll, yet she is not a public servant for a very long time.
All right, David Osiani, your thoughts on this. The president referred to it as a profound conflict of interest. And what sometimes is perturbing is that we have become such a legalistic country that we are now governed by the legal law as opposed to the moral law. And I think the moral law is a higher law that should only allow the legal to kick in when the moral, has completely gone to the dogs, which seems to be the Kenyan situation. I think we operate the other way around.
We are bereft of morality as a country. We are bereft of conscience. So we have decided that we will do what's in the law. All of us know that there is no law that prohibits me or you from insulting each other and hurling cuss words. Why don't we do it? There's no law. I mean, if you took me to court today for using a cuss word at you, the judge will ask, so what is it? What is it that he has done? Yet, we tell our children as they grow up, you cannot afford to insult someone. There's no law that institutes respect for the older people. It is entirely moral. But here we are wanting to argue. Dr. Oluga, the Secretary General of Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union, asked a very simple question. Doctors are not allowed to practice once they get into parliament. Why must it be different for lawyers? We cannot have two sets of rules. As Ruth has aptly put it, what happens when a vote has to be taken on impeachment? Because you already have taken sides. It is obvious you cannot reason as a senator at that point and look at the facts as they are. At that point, because you've chosen that you're a lawyer to this person, and you cannot decide to be a lawyer to somebody when you disagree with them. Yet now, Magal is the lawyer for Osiani in this case, going to fight it out for me in court so that the case can end. But when it comes to the Senate, Magal will say, yeah, I vote alongside my other senators because I also agree with them that, Osiani as a governor has messed up. There is nothing like that. So what happens? Do you recuse yourself from the vote at that point? And this is a new challenge Kenyans have to deal with. Every day there will be a different thing coming up that will need new legal knowledge or new interpretation. We have never dealt with a situation like this, where, we have actually. We have had all these other lawyers who are very senior representing governors, yet this is, especially where the governors are accused of embezzling county funds. These are the people who oversight the counties.
Absolutely.
What happens when the vote is brought to the Senate? Do you say we recuse ourselves? Because there are only two options. Either the lawyers, like the president has said, decide that we are not going to be practicing during our tenure, or they say, fine, we will practice, but in the event that a vote is brought to the Senate that needs us to vote, our counties will not vote because they don't vote on their own behalf.
Yeah.
They vote on behalf of their counties. So Elgeyo Marakwet wajue tu ile siku ya kupiga kura on whether we are going to eject Sonko or impeach him or not. Elgeyo Marakwet, you will not vote. Makueni County, you will not vote. Your vote will not count. You will make noise in the village, but your vote will not count in the Senate. So these are the things we need to look at a bit more keenly, and we need to look at it in its entirety. I've seen the Sosion case, for example, that has gone on and on and on for long. There are times when I actually think that, don't be greedy. Just do a role. Apply yourself to it excellently. Not because the law does not allow you to hold 12 positions. The law can even allow you to have 15, as it were. So you can be Secretary General for NAT, you can be an MP. Nominated a member of parliament, okay, on behalf and for the teachers or the workers' union. You can be chair of the board. I've seen Maina Kamanda sits on the board of the National NGO Coordination Board, and yet he's a nominated MP. I recently saw another, I think the senator for Uasin Gishu, Margaret Kamar, appointed to another board, and I'm thinking, oh Lord, my God. Why? There are so many Kenyans. At a time when Finland has just done magic.
Absolutely.
Prime Minister, 33. Minister for Interior, 34. Minister for Education, 32. My friend.
A young government.
Oh,
all right, let me come to Philip. Philip, and as you answer that question, because I see we're almost out of time, there used to be a band that would wear, or people, Christians would wear a long time ago that was written, "What would Jesus do?" I'm not asking you what would Jesus do in this case, but what would you do should you be in that position where you are a lawyer, you're a senator, but at the same time, you're given oversight. Isn't there a point where, even if it is not written, the letter of the law, the spirit of the Lord would tell you that at this point in time, I need not to represent this particular person?
Yes, the fact that I would have stood on a podium and told Kenyans that I'm going to represent them in the Senate would override, my obligations to Kenyans would override my private interests.
Yeah.
About Finland, I think those posts don't have money. If they had money, you can be sure those ladies wouldn't be there. Most so a 33-year-old lady.
Finland politics may not be like Kenyan politics.
No.
For them, it's not
Those
about
have
money.
sufficient resources. They preside over resources that are probably huger than Kenya's. Not probably,
That
obviously.
is debatable. On conflict of interest, this is a classic instance of Kenya walking naked in the marketplace.
Where?
And arguing, I remember seeing one lady, a mad lady once walking naked, and that is the picture that comes to my mind. And then arguing that, there's no law that bars us from walking naked in the marketplace on a Friday. Most markets are on Friday. Conflict of interest is a serious problem. A simple definition is this, you have your personal interest, which is conflicting with your public your public functions. Which one should override the other? Usually, there is a prescription to this. You declare and move to one side. Where you are a public officer, the Constitution and Article 75 is very clear. Public officers are supposed to conduct themselves in a way that avoids conflict of interest between their public functions and personal interest. Conflict of interest is a big problem in Kenya. You will find a doctor has opened his clinic next to
a public facility
hospital,
where he is a doctor.
Such that patients are being referred, go buy medicine in this pharmacy, go to this hospital, you'll find they have these machines. Yes, we don't have the lab, we don't have a lab, go to a lab in this particular. The same with teachers. A teacher is a teacher in a primary school, yet he runs his own school. Which one do you think will perform better? And this is what has really is causing our country to rot. And we must address it. At another level, if you look at Murkomen's role, he is conflicted as between Sonko and his master, who is the president. The president has appointed him to spearhead the government business in the Senate. Yet, he is contradicting his own principles stand and going to represent the very man that is being charged under the president's fight against corruption. He's basically calling the president's bluff, and he's telling him, look here, and he's been quite straightforward with this. He's telling him, do what you want.
Is there an element of both to the public or to the electorate and, of course, to Jubilee Party, a feeling of mtadu?
Yes, basically that's
because if we all agree right here that there's conflict of interest and even include the president into this panel and say he also agrees, if that is a sample of Kenyans who agree that there's definitely, as much as it's not written in the law, there's definitely a questionable, position. Why are we assuming that Murkomen, who's a brilliant lawyer, he's a sharp guy, does not know?
Debatable, though. That is a bit debatable.
No, because
he's being sharp.
Yes.
The reason why I say that is because when he was, and this is how he came into, this is how I remember him, is when the Constitution was being written, he was very good at articulating what the Constitution is all about. Until he got into politics, then I don't know what happened.
Now, he is the leader of government, he's the leader of the majority in Senate. Basically, the leader of government business in Senate. The reason why the fight against corruption has consistently flopped is because of politicization of the fight. You know, when the president is trying to deal with Sonko, and Sonko doesn't fall on either wings of Jubilee, and one wing comes and claims him and says, you know, you are being victimized. And in fact, the most prominent figure in Jubilee goes and hugs him. And, you know, basically what they are doing is throwing a spanner into what the president is trying to do. And I think this is what really frustrates the president. And like I said before, and I saw his Twitter handle yesterday where he said, you know, he challenged the president and said, you can name this bill after me. You know, basically slapping the man in the face. If the man is as brave as he claims to be, he should relinquish that post.
Absolutely.
And I've said he should also relinquish his senatorial seat and vie on another ticket. Otherwise, placing himself in direct conflict with the president really doesn't augur well for the well-being of this country.
And then again, I think we should look at it in terms of if political parties take conflict of interest very seriously. I mean, and I know that's on the law. I mean, when you look at the Political Parties Act, when political parties say that, you know, if you meddle with another political party's affairs, or if you appear as if you are in a different political party as opposed to the party that nominated you to parliament, then you should relinquish your seat. I mean, if they take conflict, because that is purely conflict of interest. If they take it that seriously, and remember also recently we had the issue of Mwende Mwinzi, when Mwende Mwinzi's appointment came to question, and the whole discussion was basically, if you look at the whole discussion, it could simply be narrowed down to conflict of interest, that where will your loyalty be? Is your loyalty, yes, is your loyalty to Kenya, or is your loyalty to the United States? If we take conflict of interest seriously at such small levels, or rather at such lower levels, less risky levels, what about, you know, when the interests of the country come to play? And then again, on this question of conflict of interest, and this is basically what the general public would be feeling, is that as we are talking about conflict of interest, how well do we take care of our public servants? Because now the discussion seems to have been narrowed down to lawyers, but conflict of interest takes place at very different levels. We are talking about conflict of interest in police officers serving the public, as well as, you know, working as private security for other people, or, you know, involving themselves in matatu business or things like that. So, you know, that also comes to the question also comes in the sense that if you want public servants to basically generally avoid conflict of interest, avoid serving one master as well as another master, how well have you taken care of them? Because you find a police officer, for example, earning 30,000 shillings. This person is supposed to take care of his large family, supposed to pay all his bills, and still, you know, sufficiently do so with that small salary. That is when you find them putting one foot on serving the public and another foot into, you know, funny businesses that eventually interfere with their duties. So I think no. What I think is, I'm not excusing. I'm not justifying it, but I'm also saying there was the lawyer's aspect, because this message.
But the minute we open that door slightly and say because.
No, I'm not excusing. No, I am not excusing. I'm not excusing conflict of interest, and I'm not permitting it. But I'm just saying, generally speaking, when this discussion of conflict of interest comes in, let us not think of it as a discussion targeting lawyers. You see, the problem with the country is when we want to resolve a problem, we usually we tend to react, you know. We tend to react in the sense that when lawyers begin to represent senators, that is when we start discussing conflict of interest. But we forget that conflict of interest exists at very many levels.
All right.
And there needs to be a long-term solution to it.
David, I'll give you a chance before we take a break. We need to take a break and come back with reviewing the week.
I have, of course, been one of the loudest over years and consistently supporters and proponents for better pay of teachers and policemen. And, you know, generally decent pay for health workers and everything. But I must put it here to you that the most conflicted people, the people who are most entrapped in this conflict of interest menace, are the senior most, are probably some of the highest earning individuals in our society. They're just not your common men. I mean, the policeman may take a bribe. That is corruption, not conflict of interest. He doesn't have decisions. But the PS, sometimes you realize, has a company which is running business within his ministry. It belongs to his cousin, so that it is not him. And when you ask him, he says, but my cousin, just like all, are businessmen. He should declare up front that I have a conflict of interest. Here, I am not able to execute my mandate. And so let us all agree that we are going to deal with it. It must cut from top to the bottom. That is the only way we salvage this country. I need us to understand, and the Kenyans who are listening to me must know that this is for their good. The people in Elgeyo Marakwet must understand that if Murkomen is conflicted today as their senator, when a governor in one part of the country is being hounded for supposed corruption or alleged corruption, then tomorrow Murkomen will see no problem with corruption in their backyard in Elgeyo Marakwet. These are the standards to which we must hold leaders, to which we must hold each one of them, be it my good friend and, my predecessor of many years, James Orengo, or Murkomen, or my wonderful, very close friend, Makueni Senator, who is likely the next governor for Makueni. They must understand that the overriding thing here is the good for the people. The country and its citizenry is far greater than the millions they will make being paid by Sonko, or what will I call it? The popularity that they will receive to have behaved as if they were supporting Sonko. Conscience must be called to question.
All right, we'll have to take a break right now. It's 9 minutes after 7. This is Morning Express. When we come back, let's review the week, politically speaking, and what has been happening. And of course, we have the president's speech yesterday to look at. We have Sonko saying, I'm still the boss at City Hall after he was given bail, but also directed not to appear in office as the other pronouncements that had been made in that regard. So we take a break, we come back with that and review the week.